Good evening, friends. Have you hugged a conspiracy theorist today? You should. You should find one and you should give them such a great big hug. And you say, I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. If you are one of those conspiracy theorists, which probably most people on my channel are, you give yourself a pat on the back and you hold your head up high. You are courageous, you are fierce, you are a force. And that's why they're afraid of you. So God bless you. God bless your families. May God protect you and your families with divine protection. May He protect you from all means of harm, evil, and illness. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. Listen to this, friends, because, we can say we were right about Bill Gates. And, man, I personally have been talking about Bill Gates for 15 years, and that's nothing compared to some other people. This is so old and played out, it's pathetic. But sadly, some people still don't know. For them, well, this message is for you. U.S. government-sponsored media has done a fantastic job of brushing this under the rug, yet the truth has a funny way of revealing itself. This was posted May 4th, 2026, but this speech was made on March 21st, 2026. Professor Dr. Richard Warner. Have you heard his name? You should. Listen to what he has to say. It's everything that we've been saying, pretty much, but a little bit more. Now, the title of this video is Gates Epstein Planned to Kill Millions of Poor in COVID. Economist exposes nasty scandal. Did I give this a like yet? There we go. Professor Dr. Richard Warner addressed the European Parliament at an event hosted by MEP Christine Anderson, raising concerns over digital ID systems, central bank digital currencies, and the proposed tokenization of assets, including natural resources. He warned against increasing digital control, arguing that such systems could concentrate power and potentially limit individual freedoms, while urging greater scrutiny of policies shaping the future of financial and digital governance. Well, that's a mouthful. Let's listen. Shall we?
We know that people like Jeffrey Epstein, it's now public record, were involved as early as 2017 in setting up the scheme of this great pandemic for some investors to make a fortune, such as Bill Gates. Epstein and Bill Gates discussed, matter of public record, of how to get rid of the poor people. And of course, it was used at the same time to push digital ID. Realize it's not just financial activities, it's about all activities, and the programmability is a key feature. The Bank of England asked the government, the politicians in the UK, to give them the power to have programmable digital currency, and that is a control tool. The pilot CBDC projects that are ongoing, for example, this one in Brazil in particular, experts have already found out, yes, it has all those features. You can freeze transactions, you can take people's money away, you can intervene in those ways. Now, the central planners claim we will not abuse the limitless power that digital ID and CBDCs will give us. Okay. Well, should we trust them? Well, I can be brief here. I think all of you know examples of how this sort of power has already been abused. Just thinking of Justin Trudeau's ending the peaceful demonstrations by truckers in Ottawa. The bank accounts were frozen. Their ability to buy food is how they got them. Too few used cash and digital currency. Well, they didn't have CBDCs, so they had to pass laws to do it, and that will be very easy once you have CBDCs. The police froze 206 financial products, including bank and corporate accounts, disclosed 56 entities associated with vehicles, facial recognition, even 253 Bitcoin addresses were identified, and PayPal was also shut down. So that's how they can do it. Now, interestingly, no such financial controls had been used previously to stop criminals. But, of course, peaceful demonstrating citizens, that's when it seems the central planners get pretty creative about how to stop people. And of course, we all know what happened in 2020. Digital ID suddenly were a topic. Vaccination passports as a backdoor to introduce digital ID. And then, of course, programmability. You can, close access if you don't do X, Y, Z. And can be anything the government central planners decide. And now we have the EU commissars already abusing their dictatorial powers that they've had for a while, but now they're showing these powers by declaring very polite, considered critics like Jacques Beau, a Swiss former sort of army officer, in his, just giving his opinions. He's an outlaw now. He's been sanctioned. He can't buy food. He can't leave the country, Belgium, in order to travel back to Switzerland. It is quite extraordinary. Now, on the monetary front, the CBDC is the biggest upheaval in our monetary system in more than 300 years. But the digital aspect is not new.
The 3-in-1 that actually turns him on. His confidence hits different with Rougi at Ready. It dissolves under his tongue, works in 15 minutes on average.
New. What is happening, therefore, is the centralization, but it's a particular type of centralization. The central banks are ripping up the old agreement between the banks and the central banks, which was that the central banks deal with banks and the banks deal with us. And overall, the banks haven't really abused that. They've never sold our data, ever, our transactions data. They haven't. That's really why they've become the enemy, because that's supposed to be a currency that they want to sell and trade, and banks have refused to do that. So the central banks are now stepping into the arena and want to compete against the banks. This is like playing football. The umpire saying, well, it's a bit boring. I'm going to join. I'm going to score some goals, but I'll still reserve the right to blow the whistle, give the red card, give the yellow card. Who's going to win that game? So the bank regulators will compete against the banks, because CBDC is just a current account at the central bank. That's what's happening. Of course, this conflict of interest explains what the central banks have been doing. They've been taking anti-bank policies for many decades. Already in 2002, I warned about how the central banks were creating these asset bubbles, banking crises, recessions. And of course, that has continued ever since, unabated. We've got regulatory moral hazard. The more crises they create, the more powers we give them. Each time they demand, it's because we didn't have enough powers, which is not actually true, and should have been stopped earlier. So can we trust the central banks to give them yet more power? I think the answer should be a resounding no. The high inflation that started in 21 was created by the central banks. No matter what they tell you about wars, the economics is very clear. I could forecast it quite successfully from May 2020 onwards that 18 months later we'll get significant inflation, because the money creation was just massive, off the charts. Then the central banks imposed a fake pandemic. You know that story. And we know that people like Jeffrey Epstein, is now public record, were involved as early as 2017 in setting up the scheme of this great pandemic for some investors to make a fortune, such as Bill Gates. And then we can also make money injecting people with stuff and solve the problem, as Epstein and Bill Gates discussed, matter of public record, of how to get rid of the poor people. And of course, it was used at the same time to push digital ID. Now, this is, what they're giving us is not the only option. We can have prosperity. Their goal is zero growth, negative growth. Germany now 30 year of recession, first time since 1933. But actually we could have high growth everywhere in the world and prosperity for all. How do you do that? 200 years of strong economic growth in Germany were due to many, many small banks, local money creation, money lent to small firms that are the main employer. 60%, 70% of employment is with SMEs. That's how you spread the prosperity. These hidden champions in Germany, where Germany really sticks out, is small firms that are global market leaders. Yes. Now, how's that possible? Because Germany has the largest number of banks in Europe. Well, we should use past tense, had the largest number of banks. And they were mostly small local banks. That is the way to generate prosperity. But the central planners don't like that, and they've been killing banks. So ECB policies have been very successful. Under the ECB, a very young central bank, already 6,000 banks have disappeared in Europe, and surprise, surprise, it's not Goldman Sachs that has disappeared. So last chance saloon, and I'm wrapping up here. The overarching trend of the 20th century was the concentration of power in the hands of fewer and fewer people. Lord Acton, quite wisely, he was really an observer of politics for many decades, concluded power corrupts. That's the reality. That's human nature. If you give people power and too much power, it will lead to bad results. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we have to stop the further spread of digital ID and the introduction of CBDCs. Already Europe is being deindustrialized, economically destroyed. We can't give these central planners that have delivered this yet more powers. Instead, we need to decentralize, break up the concentrated power, oppose digital ID. We are sovereign individuals. We don't need to prove our identity. If somebody wants to check identity, well, that's their problem. We need to oppose digital asset registers and tokenization of our assets and of nature. And we need, most of all, of course, to oppose CBDCs. A decentralized monetary system is the future. Many small local banks in a decentralized fashion implementing subsidiarity, that is proven to be very successful. That's how that's how China became an economic superpower within one generation. They moved from one bank in the Soviet system, central planners loved it, to 5,000 banks with 30 loan offices in 35 branches. That's more than 5 million people checking millions and millions of small firm loan applications for productive business investment. It's easier to find people to govern themselves than people fit to govern others, because those who are currently governing us, they're not fit to do so. Thank you very much.
Well, there you go. Because some people only believe it if it comes out of a civil servant's mouth for some reason, which is antithetical. But let's keep going. Professor Dr. Richard Werner addressed the European Parliament at an event hosted by MEP Christine Anderson, raising concerns over digital ID systems, central bank digital currencies, and the proposed tokenization of assets, including natural resources. And humans, because guess what, friends? They view us as cattle. And some of us act like cattle. It's what they were doing to the Irish. I mean, they've been doing this to the Irish forever, right? Over 1,000 years. And before the Irish, I mean, this is nothing new. My goodness. It's been 5 years. And there are people who are still getting the COVID vaccine. How is this our reality?
The largest autopsy series published to date, I know because I'm the senior author. Of all the deaths we examined, we re-reviewed them. We had an adjudication committee. We had ways of arbitration deciding on did the vaccine cause death. The answer is, of these cases that came in for autopsy after vaccination, 73.9% of individuals, it was determined that the vaccine was the cause of death.
The other night, well, he was in bed. I guess he was doing some thinking. Well, he was just laying there, probably not quite tired yet. He said, "You know what, Mom? Life is like a simulation." He's 10. And he's thinking about it, and he's trying to explain it, and he's struggling with his words. And I said, "You know what, buddy? You can figure this out tomorrow. Why don't you get to bed?" And then 5 minutes later, he was asleep. But are you kidding me? My 10-year-old figured out that we are living in a simulation. This is reality as perceived by the 5 senses that God gave us. However, the way we're living our lives is completely dictated. It's not the lifestyle we're intended to have. It's been created for us, and it's total garbage. You can see right through it.
The human body generates more bioelectricity than a 120-volt battery and over 25,000 BTUs of body heat. Combined with a form of fusion, the machines had found all the energy they would ever need. There are fields now, endless fields, where human beings are no longer born. We are grown.
Yeah, okay, it doesn't really look like that inside the data centers, but it's something like that. Sure, they have robots and they have these vessels, right, that they're growing fake humans in. That's why they need so much water, and our energy fields and our brain waves and everything like that, right? Okay, because they're making people, I guess. I don't know. That's my guess on it. Or they're going to be using them for energy. They're probably doing both. You know, they got their workforce and then they have their energy source. You know, kill two birds with one stone while you're at it. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What do you think? Well, let me put it to you in another way. The Cabbage Patch Kids. What a sensation. I remember a friend of mine had like 7 of them. I'd go to her house and she still had them lined up when she was like, I think 15, 16. I'm telling you, it was a big part of our childhood. It's a slap in the face. It's based on the real Cabbage Patch Kids. You should go to the website for the museum they have if you want to see something truly disturbing. Just watch my video. You know, I rewatched the video that I made about Cabbage Patch, and there's a huge chunk that's missing of important footage. It's crazy. I'm going to have to add that footage independently, but you can fast forward. There's like a 5-minute chunk. It's like black. My apologies. Cabbage Patch. Postcards. So disturbing. It's just so wrong. Yeah, the origins. Oh, it's just cute stuff. No, it's not. They've been like making babies, I think, for a long time, or breeding these babies for multiple purposes for a long time. That's what I believe. It's not just like a cute little gimmick. Now look at the boardwalk fair, the incubator babies, right? There it is. $1904. It's bull crap. I think that they can make them. And I think they've been making them for a long time. Look at this. They're like puppets. Can you imagine a doctor holding babies like this? Good Lord. So it was a sideshow. It's a side hustle. A baby incubator building. Look at those buildings, too. What the heck? Where are all these buildings? Look at that. You really think that these were just like props, these buildings? No, these were like real buildings. Oh, they demolished them all? No, that's insane. That's absolutely insane. They demolished them after the fairs, right? That's what they say.
There were a lot of new and unusual sights to be seen at the 1933 fair, but the public glimpse of the incubator had to rank near the top. Thanks for watching.
You may, I think, might find it hard to accept, but we'll go with it because we're very open-minded on this channel, and we'll ask the relevant questions if I can think of them. You may remember I had a very lovely, interesting gentleman who came on the show to tell us about the Tartarian Empire about, 3 or 4 weeks ago now. There was a lot of interest in that, and funnily enough, a video suddenly was released by, I think, a guy called Stu Peters, if I've got that right. And it was all about the previous history using airships and ether from big towers and these wonderful Palladian, Georgian-style buildings that had a lot of the buildings underground, about mud floods and all of this. And it was a fascinating documentary put together, which really challenges your version of history
on them without really digging, then you'll come across the same hurdles I did initially, and that is everything was destroyed in fires. And they've wanted to wipe out this race of people.
And when you said they, who do you mean?
It's the same old faces. It is the bloodline of the most powerful people in the world. You know, they
emailed you because it dawned, because I did a video about everyone should keep a diary, and they should, you know, a handwritten diary, because in this digital world it's very easy to sort of delete people's vlogs, blogs, online, you know, Substacks and things like that. Whereas if you are doing handwritten diary and letters and correspondence, of which we've got in the archive up and down well, across the world, huge amounts of letters going forward, you know, during the I can't even say it now, Napoleonic Wars, and all sorts of different times. You've got, and people are writing books based on these hand-delivered letters that the service was back in then. Why is it, if we've got all of that, that we don't see these letters, these books, these business accounts, all the sort of paperwork that we would have done from a Tartarian point of view, talking about, you know, big buildings suddenly being built and constructed, or I went to so-and-so, or there were these mud floods, or whatever. Why is it that there is no evidence of it in terms of letters and correspondence, which would be hard to see that there shouldn't be?
I haven't found any correspondence at all, but then I haven't specifically gone out there to search for that. What I have done is I've gone out and looked for old books, old publications, and I've come across quite a few, and I've actually bought some. Even today, actually, I saw one in an old bookshop here. And Tartaria and the Tartars are referred to in anything you can find that's older than really the mid-1800s. It's there in black and white. A lot of people will go onto the page and say Tartaria never existed. Well, you've still got the Gulf of Tartary, between Russia and China. That's still there. So if it never existed, I don't know why they would have named an expanse of water after them. But you don't need to find old books. And I think what you'll find is, if you were trying to find any information on them without really digging, then you'll come across the same hurdles I did initially, and that is everything was destroyed in fires. And they've wanted to wipe out this race of people.
And when you said they, who do you mean?
It's the same old faces. It is the bloodline of the most powerful people in the world. You know, the Council of 13, the Club of Rome. It's people will call them the Illuminati. It's the Rothschilds and co. And obviously, Rothschilds go all the way back to Amun-Ra, the pharaoh, who. After the second war he'd created, he said he would leave everything to the Ra Khan, and which translates to the Ra Childs, and slowly became the Rothschilds, and he would leave them the power and control of the planet. And nothing's changed. You have 13 families that run and own everything. So you might think, when you vote on the 4th of July, which is a strange day to pick for an election, isn't it? But again, you know, with regard to that as a side issue, left or right, they're two wings of the same bird. The bird itself is controlled by these families, as is the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the Trilateral Commission, UNICEF, NATO, behind them all, and behind the people that poison us and then provide us with the cure. It's the same companies and the same people. So often people will say his history actually refers to his story, and it is always written by the victors, and it is always the same faces. You'll see Rothschild appear more than any of the other families. There are others, DuPont, Kennedy, to name but a few, but it's always the Rothschilds at the helm. And they have wiped everything off the face of the earth, because the huge emphasis behind the Tartarian Empire was free energy.
Right.
Now, and that doesn't make money.
It doesn't make money. But prior to that, if they were in control, why did they allow that free energy to exist?
I think they battled with them for a very long time, and I think they come and go. And for example, you could argue now, why are they allowing me and you to have this conversation? The stuff is out there, and I don't think they can necessarily influence everything, and they can't stop things from happening, but they can certainly get involved and meddle. And I think that these resets are planned. I don't think that it's happening now by coincidence. A lot of people don't believe we're going through one now, but it does say it on the World Economic Forum's website. Welcome to New World Order, and the Great Reset.
The Great Reset.
Yeah. Yes. So this is something that's planned over vast periods of time. I think it probably goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, and they follow a very specific plan. And it appears to be every 250 years when we get to a point where we are taking a little bit too much control and are a little bit too independent and maybe have too much access to free energy or free anything, they get rid of us. But at the time that they got rid of the free energy, there wasn't anything else in its place. They needed the gas and oil to take off, and the internal combustion engine and coal-fired power stations, and that had to happen before they could wipe out free energy. If they had have wiped out the Tartarian free energy before they had that in place, then you'd have no infrastructure. But also, I do believe that this is planned.
Right.
And they're very, very patient, and this is going back thousands of years. Their ancestors doing this every so often.
So let's go to 1776 then, and there's all these mud floods. A lot of buildings are buried, and all the historical evidence has disappeared. Some buildings clearly remain. I was in Blackpool a couple of weeks ago, and I was looking at Blackpool famous tower, and in my mind I was thinking, having seen that documentary with the airships, I was thinking, okay, and I did actually, in the talk that I gave, I said it's nice to be in Blackpool and look at the Blackpool Tower and imagine the airship tethered to it, and the free energy being taken from the ether. Because the audience just looked at me blankly as if I was some loony. But I mentioned it in case somebody sort of smiled at me or nodded to go, oh, you know your stuff, sort of thing. So some buildings did exist. They obviously didn't get rid of all of them, and so we see these buildings across the world that have the same thing. But moving away from that, let's get on to the kids, because it seems they got rid of all the adults. I mean, there must have been some adults left. So just to talk us through that business about they got rid of the adults, and then we're left with children who presumably had to survive. Yeah,
so obviously the Napoleonic War, for example, and the civil wars that took place destroyed a lot of soldiers, ultimately a lot of men, the fires and floods. Then we had famine, such as the potato famine in Ireland. We had a lot of famine and a lot of outbreaks and things like cholera, the outbreak of cholera, and so on. So I think what happened from the research I've done is you were left with either children that had no parents, that genuinely were orphans, and at that time they were called urchins, street Arabs, mudlarks, ragamuffins, in their thousands and thousands of orphaned, genuinely homeless orphaned children that were abandoned.
From all ages, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. And but at the same time, they brought out the Lunacy Act. Now, I don't have the exact year, but I'm pretty sure it was around 1776 again that the Lunacy Act is introduced. And there are a number of reasons that you could be committed to an asylum. The asylums didn't exist in any real significant way until 1776 as well. So all of a sudden, from that period of time, you've got prisons open, orphanages open, and asylums open, all overnight in the most incredible buildings. These are the Greco-Roman buildings with pillars out of the front and often stained glass windows, huge bell towers, and inside we're talking marble and granite, the most incredible detail and architectural extravagance, really, not just with the building, but also with the grounds as well, and huge grounds. Yeah. So all of a sudden, these things popped up overnight. And again, most of them will say they were founded, which in conspiracy world, we would say found dead. Uninhabited.
Yes.
The people had gone, they'd been killed. And so a lot of these buildings that they claim were an asylum or built specifically to be a prison or an orphanage, they're incredible. These are magnificent. So all of a sudden, there are no adults around. And the ones that are left are committed to prison if they won't comply. They won't change to the new way of doing things after the reset. And the Lunacy Act meant that even being a single female parent, a mum on her own who's lost her husband in a civil war, would instantly have her children taken away because you were considered insane if you were a single parent. You were considered insane if you read too much. If you had women's problems is another one. Over religious.
Which if you had women's problems, that would be all women, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So anything they could do to get your children away from you, and at the same time get you off the street. Because if you were still talking about where's the free energy gone, what happened to the Tartarian Empire, you had to get out of the way. And they would try and re-educate these people and recondition them. And if they couldn't do that, then you stayed locked away. So we're left with an abundance of children, orphans, homeless children.
Right, who know nothing and can be easily taught a history, which may or may not be true.
Absolutely. And they were shipped all over the world.
Now, you mentioned before we recorded, another thing you mentioned as we were sort of talking in our preamble is that there was such an abundance of children. Where did they all come from? And there was the suggestion that maybe, and I know you said you didn't have any evidence for this, that they were cloning.
Yeah.
Mercy. It says Charles Loring Brace, the man who created them. And was a visionary philanthropist who rescued nearly 200,000 children from the squalor of New York City's streets and gave them new lives in the wholesome farmlands of the American heartland. That story appeared in textbooks. It was repeated in newspapers. It was taught to generations of American schoolchildren as an example.
Makes me think of Anne of Green Gables.
Example of private charity working exactly as it should, the market solving a social problem without government interference. What that story leaves out is everything that actually happened. The orphan trains were not primarily a charity program. They were a labor redistribution system designed at the precise moment American agriculture needed cheap child labor on a massive scale. The children on those trains were not orphans. Most of them had living parents. And the families those children were placed with were not vetted, were not monitored, and were not held accountable for what happened inside their homes. Clara Dolan knew all of this. She had lived all of this, and before she died, she told a young nursing student named Rosemary Adkins everything she remembered. Rosemary kept the notes for 40 years. She thought someone official would eventually want them. Nobody ever came. Today, we are going to tell you what Clara said. And we're going to show you why the people who ran the orphan train program needed her to forget it. To understand what the orphan trains actually were, you first have to understand what they were supposed to be. The story begins in 1853 in New York City. The city has a problem that its newspapers are calling a crisis. Tens of thousands of children are living and dying in the streets of Lower Manhattan. They are picking pockets. They are sleeping under piers. They are dying of cholera and typhus and simple exposure in alleyways that the rest of the city pretends not to see. The newspapers call them street Arabs, they call them waifs, they call them the dangerous classes. The language itself tells you something about how the city views these children. They are not seen as victims of poverty or immigration policy or the catastrophic conditions in the tenement districts. They are seen as a threat, a social contagion, a problem to be managed. Into this situation steps Charles Loring Brace. He is 27 years old, a Yale-educated minister's son from Connecticut, and he is burning with evangelical energy and progressive ideas. He founds the Children's Aid Society in 1853. He writes pamphlets, he raises money, he gives lectures. He is extraordinarily effective at all of it. And in 1854, he proposes a solution. He calls it placing out. The idea is simple on its surface. Take the children off the streets of New York, put them on trains, send them west to farming families who will take them in, feed them, clothe them, educate them, and raise them as their own. The newspapers love it. The donors love it. The city government, which has been spending money on overcrowded orphan asylums for decades, loves it most of all. What nobody asks at this moment, the question that does not appear in the pamphlets or the fundraising letters or the newspaper coverage, is this. Who exactly are these children? Where did they come from? And what happens to them after the train leaves? Here is the answer to the first question, and it is the answer that changes everything. The children on the orphan trains were, in the overwhelming majority, not orphans. A study published decades later, drawing on Children's Aid Society records, found that fewer than 1 in 4 of the children sent west had lost both parents.
Well, looks like they're about done, Helper. Are you ready to meet the Venture Brothers? Well, looks like they're about done, Helper. Are you ready to meet the Venture Brothers?
Titular twins? Missing mom never actually birthed them and simply donated her eggs to one of these. Their dad? What is going on? So weird. It's so weird. Artificial womb, a short history. Okay. The idea of artificial wombs began to be seriously discussed in the West in Britain after World War I. Okay, well, that does kind of fit in with the timeline, I guess, huh? Inspired by modern feminism, J.B.S. Haldane's imagined future use of artificial wombs in his essay, Daedalus, or Science and the Future, inspired debate among his contemporaries for a decade, including Aldous Huxley, who indelibly cast the technology as dystopian. After World War II, bio-utopian ideas like artificial wombs were associated with fascism, although socialist feminists briefly renewed the debate over the liberatory potential of artificial wombs in the 1970s. Like, I don't want to use my body to grow a baby. I got important things to do out in this world. I'm too important to society to have to grow a baby in my own womb. I don't want to push no baby out of my body. That's painful. That's disgusting. Do you think I got the argument right? I don't know. Anyway, Recent innovations in neonatal intensive care have again generated discussion of the ethical and political impacts of artificial wombs. Again, artificial wombs are seen by some as a way to expand reproductive freedom and gender equality, while critics worry they might have negative impacts on women and abortion access. Oh no! I hope it doesn't have negative impact on my right to murder my unborn child. Okay, so maybe these articles are real, or it's like the media preparing us, right? Programming us for this to be normalized. I don't know. But the first baby born in UK to a woman with transplanted womb, that's interesting. Kind of weird. Wouldn't that womb have its own like DNA and stuff? I don't know. It's just... Pregnancy humanoid. Tiny little human being. Okay, so this is 2019. A recent study reveals that an extremely premature child can healthily grow in an artificial womb. Researchers have published a study in the American Journal. Medical science is reaching new heights in the field of child conception and pregnancy. WRF? Artificial placenta technology. That sounds disgusting too. Hey guys, remember that obnoxious kid with a mullet who supposedly owns that Rainmaker company in Texas that very well may have murdered all those children, those little girls at that sleepaway camp? Remember he was like, oh, it couldn't possibly have been us. It was like 2 days or hours. And, you know, I actually did a video about it where he completely contradicts himself within like 2 questions in the interview. Anyway, they're stewarding the world. You know, he was a fellow Peter Thiel fellowship winner, recipient of like, I think it's $200,000 that he gives to kids instead of going to college, come work for him to like steward the world, right? They're killing us for sure. You guys know that, right? You know that we can't trust anybody that's associated with Peter Thiel. I mean, he gets his money from Peter Thiel. Like, think about that. And I still don't know how to pronounce his name properly, so I go back and forth. So yeah, what's up with that? Why Bill Gates is trending amid Texas floods. Cloud seeding, weather modification claim source. Bill Gates suddenly started trending on social media platforms after catastrophic floods hit Texas and several children from Camp Mystic went missing. And, well, we don't know if they're dead or if they were stolen, or we have no idea, because they do these sinister things that we just can't comprehend, right? We can't even think this stuff up. So, yep, here he is. Free as a bird. I mean, he's in complete bondage to the demons that rule him. But, you know, he's not in prison where he belongs. Microsoft co-founder has found himself at the center of a conspiracy theory linking his past funding of geoengineering projects, such as cloud seeding and solar radiation modification, to the floods that killed over 70 people. And it's interesting, too, because Peter Thiel should have been all over the news, because this is basically his baby. You know, Mullet Boy's company, but he funded it, so it's his project. So what's up? I don't think people understand what Peter Thiel is all involved with. And it's genocide on multiple levels, just like Bill Gates. Maybe he's not as accomplished of an assassin as Bill Gates. A philanthropic assassin, right? So much philanthropy. So little time. Mullet. That's how I found the article. Weather mod company, Texas, mullet. It's ridiculous. So many conspiracy theories proven true, friends. So many. I'm going to do a video about it eventually. Theory of totalitarianism. James Burnham is the real intellectual founder of the neoconservative movement and the original proselytizer in America of the theory of totalitarianism. Traced back to 80 years ago when American former high-level Trotskyist, who later went on to become the intellectual founding father of neoconservatism, James Burnham, wrote a book on his vision for the managerial revolution, and that it was, in fact, these ideologies of Burnham that triggered Orwell to write his 1984. From Trotsky's permanent revolution to global fascism, Burnham's recruitment into Allen Dulles' OPC. Great, Dulles brothers again. In 1953, Burnham was called upon again by Wisner to reach beyond communism to help overthrow the democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh in Tehran, Iran. How do you like that? Didn't start in the 70s. We were messing with them in the 50s. His book, The Machiavellians, Defenders of Freedom, would become the CIA's manual for displacing Western culture with an alternative doctrine for endless conflict in a world of oligarchs. The Machiavellians, Burnham's managerial defenders of freedom. The modern state is an engine of propaganda, alternately manufacturing crisis and claiming to be the only instrument that can effectively deal with them. And that's what we've been saying for months. This propaganda, in order to be successful, demands the cooperation of writers, teachers, and artists, not as paid propagandists or state-censored time servers, but as free intellectuals capable of policing their own jurisdictions and of enforcing acceptable standards of responsibility within the various intellectual professions. In Burnham's The Managerial Revolution, he writes, most of these intellectuals are not in the least aware that the net social effect of the ideologies which they elaborate contributes to the power and privilege of the managers and to the building of a new structure of class rule in society. As in the past, the intellectuals believe that they are speaking in the name of truth and for the interests of all humanity. Indeed, the intellectual, without usually being aware of it, elaborate the new ideologies from the point of view of the position of the managers. What this means is that the intellectuals themselves do not understand who in fact will benefit in the end by the philosophies and theories they support and defend. They are mere instruments for the propagation of a new ruling class and hold no true power. Aldous Huxley's, who also promoted a managerial ruling class in his Brave New World, speech to naive Berkeley students titled The Ultimate Revolution comes to mind. As Huxley put it, there will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak. Producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it. As already stated, Burnham had been recommended by George F. Kennan to lead the Semi-Autonomous Psychological Strategy Board, PSB, division of the Office of Policy Coordination, OPC. The PSB D33-2, created on May 5, 1953, laid out the strategy for how free intellectuals could be manipulated against their own interests to facilitate a CIA-dictated transformation of Western culture. In fact, Francis Stoner Saunders makes the point in The Cultural Cold War, it is likely Burnham himself was the one to draft PSB D33-2. Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould write in The Final Stage of the Machiavellian Elites' Takeover of America, PSB D33-2 foretells of a long-term intellectual movement to break down worldwide doctrinaire thought patterns while creating confusion, doubt, loss of confidence in order to weaken objectively the intellectual appeal of neutralism and to predispose its adherents towards the spirit of the West. The goal was to predispose local elites to the philosophy held by the planners, while employing local elites would help to disguise the American origin of the effort so that it appears to be a native development. Now think about that in regards to these tech billionaires. While declaring itself as an antidote to communist totalitarianism, which is what this current Nazi regime is doing, right? One internal critic of the program, PSB officer Charles Burton Marshall, viewed PSB D33-2 itself as frighteningly totalitarian, interposing a wide doctrinal system that accepts uniformity as a substitute for diversity, embracing all fields of human thought, all fields of intellectual interests, from anthropology, it's late, friends, and artistic creations, to sociology and scientific methodology. He concluded, that is just about as totalitarian as one can get. With the Machiavellians, Burnham had composed the manual that the old Trotskyists left, together with a right-wing Anglo-American elite. The political offspring of that volatile union would be called neoconservatism, whose overt mission would be to roll back Russian Soviet influence everywhere. Its covert mission would be to reassert a British cultural dominance over the emerging Anglo-American empire and maintain it through propaganda. And you just think about King Charles. I did a video recently about him, and at the end is the standing ovation he gets when he addresses Congress. Can you imagine? Like, George Washington must have been rolling in his grave. The King of England addressing our Congress. It's certainly is special. It certainly is special, friends. And you know, we haven't even talked about Bill Gates and direct energy weapons. You know, get into pivotal comware, wave bending tech that's used for lasers and cancer surgery, right? When they go in and they zap all the cancer, it just kills everything, destroys everything around it, right? And let's not forget about the 5G wave bending tech that's also used for crowd dispersal. And I believe that's what they used in Venezuela. Yep, so we got lasers, and we have, what is that? The wave bending tech for crowd dispersal. I forget what it's called. It's absolutely disgusting what this one man has done. It's unbelievable. GMOs, mass farmer suicide, vaccines, buying up farmland, 3D printed food, wave bending tech. I mean, it just goes on and on. Geoengineering. It's almost like Bill Gates is the Antichrist. It's almost like a lot of people are vying for the Antichrist and Bill Gates is in the lead. What do you think? Do you think Bill Gates is the winner of prison dinner? Or maybe more like the Lake of Fire dinner? Or you think Trump is worse than him? You think the Clintons are worse? I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. Burnham writes, the ideology must ostensibly speak in the name of humanity, the people, the race, the future, God, destiny, and so on. Furthermore, in spite of the opinion of many present-day cynics, not just any ideology is capable of appealing to the sentiments of the masses. It is more than a problem of skillful propaganda technique. A successful ideology has got to seem to the masses, in however confused a way, actually to express some of their own interests. I guess that's why they pretend to be Democrats and Republicans. At the present time, the ideologies that can have a powerful impact, that can make a real headway, are naturally the managerial ideologies, since it is these that alone correspond with the actual direction of events. In place of the individual, the stress turns to the state, the people, the folk, the race. In place of private enterprise, socialism, only by name, or collectivism. In place of freedom and free initiative, planning. Less talk about rights and natural rights, more about duties and order and discipline. Less about opportunity and more about JOBs. He goes on to discuss the need to change, the meaning of words such destiny, the future, sacrifice, power, from the old ideologies of capitalism to suit the new ideologies of managerialism. George Orwell would address this in his 1984, where Burnham's The Managerial Revolution appears pseudonymously with the theory and practice of oligarchical collectivism. Burnham continues, there will be no the managerial ideology any more than there was the capitalist ideology. The several managerial ideologies will, however, revolve around a common axis, as the capitalist ideologies revolved around a common and different axis. In this country, technocracy and the much more important New Dealism are and less developed types of primitive Native American managerial ideologies. Burnham's reference to New Dealism as a managerial policy may be troubling to some. However, Burnham only looks at the mechanics of a social situation and its potential uses as in a managerial society. It does not mean that the thing he is talking about, as it is currently functioning, is a form of oppression on the people. As Burnham states in his book, Roosevelt's New Dealism is not what was intended on paper, so to speak. Burnham writes, the firmest representatives of the New Deal are not Roosevelt or the other conspicuous New Deal politicians, but the younger group of administrators, experts, technicians, bureaucrats who have been finding throughout the state apparatus. In short, the managers. Yeah, remember the Green New Deal? Use that as an example here. These are the sorts of ideologies we are told will be universally beneficial, when in reality they are meant to benefit a select ruling class, in this case a managerial class, with the intention to maximize global control to the detriment of the majority. As Orwell put it in his essay, Second Thoughts on Burnham, it will be seen that Burnham's theory is not, strictly speaking, a new one. Many earlier writers have foreseen the emergence of a new kind of society, neither capitalist nor socialist, and probably based upon slavery. The Great Reset, oligarchical collectivism. What you radicals and we who hold opposing views differ about is not so much the end as the means, not so much what should be brought about as how it should and can brought about. Otto H. Kahn, speaking to the League of Industrial Democracy in New York, December 1924, partner of Jacob Schiff and Felix Warburg's Kuhn, Loeb and Company. Loeb, I think of Avi Loeb, that weird Harvard scientist who kept making comments about 3A Atlas being a UFO, and director of American International Corps. Burnham concludes in his Managerial Revolution, the New World political system based on a small number of superstates will still leave problems more, perhaps, than a unified single world state. But it will be enough of a solution for society to keep going. How much longer do you think it can keep going, friends? Because this is not sustainable. It feels like it's just going to fall apart soon. Let's do a reading. 1 Peter 1 through 25. First Peter 1. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to God's elect, exiles scattered throughout the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who have been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father through the sanctifying work of the Spirit, to be obedient to Jesus Christ and sprinkled with his blood. Grace and peace be yours in abundance. Praise to God for a living hope. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Though you have not seen him, you love him. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Concerning this salvation, the prophets who speak of the grace that was to come to you searched intently and with the greatest care, trying to find out the time and circumstances to which the Spirit of Christ in them was pointing when he predicted the sufferings of the Messiah and the glories that would follow. It was revealed to them that they were not serving themselves but you, when they spoke of the things that have now been told you by those who have preached the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven. Even angels long to look into these things. Be holy. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, be holy because I am holy. Since you call on a Father who judges each person's work impartially, live out your time as foreigners here in reverent fear. For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. He was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. Through him you believe in God, who raised him from the dead and glorified him, so your faith and hope are in God. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart. For you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and enduring Word of God. And again, the heart, that vortex of energy that connects us emotionally, spiritually. For all people are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers, and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever. And this is the word that was preached to you. Simon Peter, a servant and apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who through the righteousness of our God and Savior Jesus Christ have received a faith as precious as ours. Grace and peace be multiplied to you through the knowledge of God and Jesus our Lord.